is one of the biggest breakups in hip-hop history. Oh, that's easy. The Dipset. One of the biggest, easy. 100%. Dipset breakup.
Yeah, man, you better chill the fuck
That's
up.
like top 3.
100%.
What?
Top 3.
One of the biggest. Nigga,
It's top
the
3.
Dipset breaking up is one of the
First
biggest,
the
nigga.
Dipset breakup. Now every
Yes,
day I wake
nigga.
up.
Every day I
They got a
fucking wake up,
problem.
nigga. What's up, Jimothy? Yes, one of the, yes, yes. You're fucking.
I think you can fix that, though, man.
Who? You?
I think you can fix that.
You think I can do it?
Yeah. I don't know. With your ways, I don't know.
With your
Jim Jones found himself at the center of online jokes and commentary, and not for anything related to music, business, or industry drama. This was about a real-life moment that most people would find frustrating but forgettable. Reports and clips began circulating online suggesting that Jim Jones ended up stranded on the highway after running out of gas, and that he had to walk roughly 2 miles just to reach a gas station. For someone associated with Dipset energy, luxury talk, and decades of presence in hip-hop culture, the situation immediately caught people's attention, precisely because it felt so unexpectedly ordinary. According to what was being shared, Jones had been out on the road when his vehicle simply stopped. Empty tank. And instead of some seamless celebrity fix or immediate assistance, he got out and handled it on foot. That detail alone was enough to spark instant conversation online. In today's world, that's all it takes. Even small, everyday struggles become viral content the moment a public figure is involved. And once the story started spreading, social media did exactly what it always does. Humor took over. Sympathy wasn't really part of the equation. People jumped straight to comments, jokes, remixes, and punchlines. The contrast is what made it land so hard. A rap veteran, someone built on imagery of confidence, status, and lifestyle, walking 2 miles on a highway for gas. That gap between the image and the reality is exactly the kind of thing the internet runs on. Fabolous was among the names that surfaced in response. He reportedly dropped a slick, indirect comment that leaned on wordplay and timing, something to the effect that moving fast without paying attention can still leave you standing still. The tone wasn't aggressive. It was that subtle, competitive humor that hip-hop veterans tend to trade when reacting to each other online. It wasn't really an attack on the man. It was more about the irony of the moment itself, and how quickly that kind of contrast becomes a punchline in a culture where image carries so much weight.
Mace jumped in as well, taking a more straightforwardly comedic angle, leaning into jokes about fuel and timing, tossing in laughing emojis, and keeping things light rather than confrontational. The kind of reaction that doesn't start anything, but absolutely adds to the momentum. Because once recognizable names start weighing in, the incident stops being just a story. It becomes a shared cultural moment. From there, online commentators took it even further. Memes started circulating. Roast commentary followed. Some users ran with exaggerated takes, joking about the irony of someone from an industry so closely tied to wealth imagery dealing with something as basic as an empty gas tank. But the humor was never really about the gas. It was about contrast. Hip-hop has always been built on larger-than-life presence, and when something this grounded and relatable happens to someone operating in that space, it gets amplified, every time. What happened next was interesting. The conversation didn't stay focused on the incident itself. It shifted toward how Jim Jones responded to it. Rather than treating it like a setback worth dwelling on, he acknowledged the situation and kept moving. He mentioned having a live stream scheduled, talked about adjusting his timing, and made it clear that a roadside inconvenience wasn't going to derail his day. The schedule stayed the schedule. That response added a different dimension to the whole moment. While the internet was busy crafting jokes, Jones was already back on track. And that's actually a reflection of what life looks like for artists who are constantly in motion. Things go wrong, plans get disrupted, but the expectation, both from the audience and from the industry, is to keep going regardless. Interviews, appearances, streaming commitments, studio time, none of it waits because something went sideways on the highway. Still, the internet wasn't ready to let it go just yet. Part of what kept it alive was how genuinely relatable the situation was underneath all the celebrity framing. Running out of gas is something that happens to ordinary people all the time, but when it happens to someone with a larger-than-life image, that relatability becomes irony, and irony is the engine of viral content.
The tone throughout stayed mostly playful. This wasn't a controversy. Nobody was calling for anything serious. It was a short wave of commentary that rolled across platforms, gave people something to laugh about, and then gradually gave way to the next trending moment, which is exactly how these cycles work in online entertainment spaces. But what the moment really illustrated wasn't the incident itself, it was the speed of the transformation. A routine roadside problem became peer commentary, fan memes, and cross-platform discussion within hours. That's the reality of being a public figure in the digital age. There's no such thing as a private inconvenience anymore, not when you've been in the spotlight for as long as Jim Jones has. Even as the jokes continued circulating, people started noticing something else. The fact that he still showed up for his audience, still addressed the live stream, still stayed connected despite the frustration, didn't go unmentioned. Even in the middle of the roast, some people acknowledged that consistency. Fabulous's comment kept circulating well past its initial moment. People kept pulling it back up, reposting it, and attaching it to completely unrelated situations as though it were a general life philosophy. That's the other thing about hip-hop commentary online. One well-timed line gets extracted from its original context and takes on a whole second life. Mace's reaction stayed in rotation too, though more for the comedic delivery than anything else. The laughing emojis, the light tone, it all signaled that within that circle of artists, this was a shared laugh, nothing more. Fans, meanwhile, ran with it fully. Some exaggerated the distance he walked, others compared it to survival scenarios, a few used it as a launching pad for broader jokes about the unpredictability of life on the road, celebrity or not. Because again, it was never really about Jim Jones specifically. It was about that gap between image and reality, that contrast between how we perceive public figures and how life actually treats everyone equally when a tank hits empty. Some users even noted that in a different era, a moment like this never would have traveled beyond a small circle. Word of mouth, maybe, but it wouldn't have trended. It wouldn't have pulled in reactions from other artists within the hour. The speed at which narratives form, peak, and fade today is something previous generations of artists never had to navigate.
In the end, Jim Jones did what he always does. He kept it moving. The internet had its moment with it, got its laughs, and moved on. But for that brief window, it became one of those light, oddly memorable celebrity moments that blends humor, relatability, and culture all in one. A reminder that no matter the status, no matter the image, real life shows up for everybody. What used to stay private now becomes clips, captions, reactions, and reposts across multiple platforms almost instantly. And while most people were leaning into the humor, a few voices tried to pull the conversation back to something more grounded. Their point was simple. This could happen to anyone. Cars run out of gas, plans get disrupted, timing goes sideways. The only real difference here was visibility. When you're a public figure, even the most routine inconvenience gets amplified and repackaged as entertainment. To his credit, Jim Jones didn't pour fuel on the fire. He didn't escalate anything online, didn't turn it into a back and forth, and didn't make it bigger than it needed to be. He just kept moving. And in today's online climate, that kind of restraint actually matters. Reactions are what keeps stories alive. Without conflict, without drama, without a response that gives people something new to grab onto, most topics naturally burn themselves out. This one was no different. For a short window, though, it had already done its job as a cultural moment. It wasn't about beef, competition, or any kind of industry tension. It was simply a real-life situation that got picked up, amplified through humor and timing, and passed around social media until the next thing came along. And once that next headline appeared, as it always does, attention drifted elsewhere. The clips and jokes remained, filed away in the internet's archive of random celebrity moments that fans circle back to later just for the laugh. Nothing changed in any meaningful way. No career shifted, no relationships were affected. It was just another example of how fast an ordinary experience can become online entertainment the moment a recognizable name is attached to it. As the noise started fading, what lingered wasn't really about the roadside situation at all. It was about perception. Jim Jones didn't turn it into a storyline, and that decision played a significant role in how quickly things cooled down. The internet feeds on escalation. Take that away, and even the most viral moments lose their momentum faster than people expect.
But by the time things quieted down, the moment had already run its full course. Fans, commentators, and fellow artists had all weighed in. Fabulous's well-timed commentary and Mace's humor had already been quoted, reposted, and turned into standalone captions living across different platforms. That's just how the cycle works. A moment happens, reactions stack on top of each other, and then the culture moves on while the content stays behind. What made this one linger slightly longer than the average viral clip was that contrast between expectation and reality. Jim Jones spent decades building an image in an industry that places enormous weight on status, lifestyle, and control. So when something as straightforward as an empty gas tank disrupts that picture, even briefly, people notice. That gap between the polished image and the grounded reality is exactly what the internet gravitates toward every single time. And yet, none of the reactions carried any real edge. The comments from Fabolous and Mace weren't industry shots. They weren't designed to spark conflict or send a message. They were quick, light, and rooted in humor, passing jokes more than anything else, which is precisely why the situation never grew into something more serious. It stayed right in that space between entertainment and everyday life, never crossing into actual tension. Jim Jones, by choosing not to engage with the noise, essentially closed the loop himself. He referenced the inconvenience, pivoted back to his live stream, and redirected attention toward his work. And that shift matters, because attention follows activity. Once he gave people something else to focus on, the highway story naturally began to fade into the background. New topics took over timelines, new clips started trending, and the gas station walk became just another entry in the long archive of unexpected celebrity moments, the kind people pull up in compilations and throwback posts months later, laugh at again briefly, and scroll past. In the broader picture, nothing really changed between anyone involved. No fallout, no confirmed issues, no ongoing disputes, just a moment that lived its short life on the internet, and then quietly disappeared, the way most things eventually do.
And that's really how these things go in modern hip-hop culture. A moment happens, reactions pile on and amplify it, and then it dissolves just as fast as it arrived. But while it lasted, it gave people exactly what drives online engagement: humor, surprise, and recognizable names reacting in real time. Once that cycle runs its course, the timeline is already moving on to whatever story is next in line. By this point, the situation had pretty much reached its natural endpoint. But the way it continued to linger said something worth noting about how celebrity moments get processed online. Even after the joke slowed down, people were still clipping older reactions, reposting Fabolous's line, and recycling Mace's comment as a caption for completely unrelated videos. That's usually the final stage of a viral moment, when it stops being news and just becomes internet material that floats around indefinitely. Looking back at it, what also became clear was just how small the actual incident was relative to the attention it received. Running out of gas and walking to a station is something that happens to regular people every single day. The only reason it became a talking point at all was because of who it happened to, and because social media has a way of attaching humor, meaning, and narrative to even the most routine situations, the moment a known name is involved. For Jim Jones, none of it created any real disruption beyond that brief window of attention. He stayed focused on his content, his appearances, and his ongoing projects. That consistency matters more than people realize in these moments, because the internet will always try to stretch a minor incident into a larger story if given the opportunity. Moving forward without making a statement usually shuts that down more effectively than any response would. Fabolous and Mace weren't pulled into anything deeper either. Their comments stayed exactly where they started. Light humor, industry familiarity, quick reactions. That kind of exchange is common in hip-hop. It's less about conflict and more about personality-driven commentary that feels authentic, precisely because it's unscripted. Fans respond to that energy.
As time passed, the whole thing fully transitioned into memory-based content. People started referencing it simply as, "That time Jim Jones ran out of gas," which is usually the final form any viral moment takes. It gets stripped of context, compressed into a one-line summary, and filed away as a reusable punchline for future comparisons. That's where the story eventually settled. No continuation, no escalation, no hidden fallout. Just a fast-moving internet wave that peaked quickly and faded out naturally. The highway moment stopped being about the event itself and became more of a reflection of how rapidly attention moves in modern entertainment culture. It stands as yet another example of how ordinary situations get briefly amplified when public figures are involved, especially in hip-hop, where personality, image, and commentary are always woven into the larger conversation. Once the reposts slowed and the jokes ran their course, everything simply returned to normal. The moment was filed away into the internet's endless stream of short-lived stories, as if it had already been forgotten before it was fully finished trending. There was no resolution waiting at the end of this one, just quiet, fading attention, which is honestly how most of these situations close out. For Jim Jones, the focus stayed where it always is, staying active, staying visible, keeping the content moving. A moment like this doesn't derail someone operating at his level. It becomes temporary noise around an otherwise consistent routine of work, appearances, and audience engagement. Once the live stream timing was sorted and the day moved forward, the incident stopped carrying any practical weight.
What's worth reflecting on is how completely and quickly the narrative detached from the actual event. A minor roadside inconvenience became commentary, then memes, then recycled jokes, and eventually a reference point people drop into completely unrelated conversations without even remembering how it started. That's the internet. That's the cycle. And it'll do the exact same thing again the next time something ordinary happens to someone extraordinary. That transformation is really what makes internet culture so distinct right now. Events don't just disappear, they mutate. They shed their original context and grow into something else entirely. Fabolous' comments eventually stopped functioning as a response to Jim Jones and started circulating as a standalone life metaphor about pace, timing, and staying prepared. Mace's humor got lifted and reused in completely different situations that had nothing to do with highways or gas tanks. At a certain point, the original incident became almost irrelevant to how the words were actually being used. Meanwhile, fans moved on, the way they always do. New topics, new clips, new debates filled up the timelines within days. The highway story didn't get a follow-up chapter, because it didn't need one. It had already completed its run through the attention cycle. Appear, spread, peak, and fade. That's the full arc, and this one followed it exactly. And underneath all of it, the bigger pattern stayed exactly the same. Hip-hop culture and internet culture continue to overlap in a way where even the most ordinary real-life moment can be converted into entertainment, not because it carries any real significance, but simply because it's visible. That visibility is what drives the entire engine. It always has been. So in the end, there was no twist waiting to unfold, no fallout, no continuation. Just a brief viral moment that moved fast, attracted heavy commentary, and then quietly dissolved back into the endless current of online content, leaving behind nothing but clips, jokes, and reposts that people might randomly stumble across weeks later, laugh at for a second, and keep scrolling. And just like that, it was done.